This video is for educational and historical purposes only. It may contain scenes some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Coming up on today's Wild West. Saddle up for a real deal cattle drive as we ride Montana's Dryhead Ranch. He lived the Old West, then preserved it with his paintbrush. We'll show you the home, studio, and the amazing art of the beloved cowboy artist, Charlie Russell. Then, all aboard for the Colorado Railroad Museum.
We'll take you along coming up next on today's Wild West.
The Wild West. It's still out there. And we'll show you how to find it. This is today's Wild West.
I've always wanted to come to Montana and go on a cattle drive.
Something that I've always wanted to do. Because I come from London, I just look up and I think, I'm moving cattle in Montana. Here we go.
Driving cattle at Dryhead Ranch in south central Montana. It's remote country, a blank spot on the map. But it's just a couple of hours from the Billings Airport. People from all over the world find their way here to experience the real deal cowboy life.
It's how you think of things when you watch Western movies, you know, and you kind of romanticize it, but it really is here.
Like New Yorker Nan Cody, visiting Montana, pushing cattle horseback for the very first time.
And to be able to enjoy it and make that dream come true, I'm just really blessed.
Dryhead Ranch is a working cattle and horse ranch that runs about 1,000 cow-calf pairs and keeps about 150 horses on some 30,000 deeded acres on the vast Crow Indian Reservation.
If you're looking for a swimming pool or tennis courts or even just trail riding, Dryhead Ranch probably isn't for you. But if you want to experience a real working cattle ranch, this is the place to saddle up.
For nearly 40 years, Dryhead has welcomed a handful of weekly guests, no more than 10 at a time, to experience their way of life. Do whatever it takes to keep the ranch running.
We get them up early in the morning and we sometimes keep them out late at night, and that's just the way it is when you run cattle.
It's incredible. Unbelievable. It's more than I anticipated.
This week before Memorial Day is one of 4 spring cattle drive weeks at Dryhead, and the day starts early with a hearty breakfast at 6 in a log cabin dining room that was once the homestead cabin of Jennifer's great-grandmother. Located miles beyond the end of the pavement, Dryhead Ranch headquarters is in a beautiful canyon lined by rimrock walls. Indians ran buffalo off one of the cliffs here, known as a buffalo jump, a method they used for hunting the animals before they had horses. The many dry buffalo skulls found in the area, or dry heads, gave Dryhead Ranch its name. Every morning after breakfast, we pile into a couple of 4-wheel drive Suburbans for the adventurous drive down the long, muddy, and rutted ranch road.
Everybody on?
To meet our horses and the cattle herd, we'll spend the day driving.
Let's head out, guys.
It may be late May, but overnight snow has it looking more like winter than spring.
Did you get snow done?
A little bit.
Yeah. It's a kiss from Canada.
But we're all dressed for the weather, prepared for a wet and cold day in the saddle and a day of adventure, driving cattle. This is not a make-believe cattle drive. The ranch really does need to move these cows. The herd has just spent the winter on Dryhead's winter pasture land outside Lovell, Wyoming, just south of the Montana border. Come spring, it takes 4 separate week-long cattle drives to bring 1,000 cow-calf pairs up to their summer range. The animals will be driven out again in late November in what can be brutal winter weather. It'll be plenty western on this drive.
Love this Phoenix weather.
As we endure rain, cold, and even snow for much of the week, with a howling wind as well.
A little cold, a little rainy, but it's a beautiful day in Montana.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
But no one complains. After all, the weather just adds to the adventure of living the dream.
Yeah, it's brisk, isn't it?
It is brisk, and it's wet, but we're getting there.
A rainy, cold day on a horse beats any day at a desk.
So this is a pretty cool graduation present, huh?
Yeah, it is.
Hope Brown is here with her dad, Carl, who gave his daughter a week at Dryhead as a high school graduation present.
This is all about my daughter. She loves this kind of thing. Normally, if it was up to me, I probably wouldn't have done it, but now that I have, I'm glad I did. Living the dream.
That's right.
Not bad for a person who sits behind a computer all day long. This is definitely out of my territory, but I love it.
My son suggested it.
Another family from another generation is here as well. Dwayne Pickens and his son Dwayne Jr., a Phoenix police officer better known as DJ.
I just wanted to see what my dad did as a kid.
Dwayne Sr. grew up horseback riding his granddad's ranch outside Malta, Montana, in the northeast corner of the state near the Canadian border.
So this must put you back to being a kid again, huh?
Yep, you betcha. Yeah.
Dwayne just turned 80, still fit and going strong.
And you still like horses.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of the week so far?
It's been excellent. A little bit chilly, but still, it's worth it.
And the always smiling Kathy Forward is here from Canada,
How you doing?
I'm so good.
where she once had her own ranch.
You just blend in and you can do as much or as little as you want, and it is wide open, beautiful, rustic country with absolutely great horses.
Now when you whistle, are you calling them in or what?
Oh, mainly just make it stop for a second.
Just as interesting as the guests are the people you meet who live this life every day. Like Chris Hatch. Chris is a real deal working cowboy, but he gets plenty of help from his 3 very well-trained dogs. They're border collie Kelpie crosses. Fun to watch them work. They never stop. And any maverick that steps out of line will soon get their attention. Jennifer's daughter Kristen is here with her dog,
He's an Australian Shepherd. Yeah, he's only 2.
who's just as busy as the other 3 canine cowboys.
He's super tired when he gets home. He just flat lays out. He's done for the day.
Kristen left the ranch for a spell to check out life in the city, but the 23-year-old didn't stay away for long.
I left for a little while and worked in town and just realized that, you know, I wanted to get back to horses and around the ranch and really enjoy being back.
Preserving this way of life they love is what this cattle drive is all about, and why Dryhead opened the ranch to guests in the early 1980s. As owner Jay Kahn told us under the porch during a rainstorm.
You can't just ranch. You have to have more than that, especially if you're trying to grow and trying to make something for the future.
It's not always easy making ends meet raising horses and cattle, and paying guests provide a financial boost to the bottom line. And the visitors get a taste of an experience they can otherwise only dream about. It's a win-win deal.
Like I say, it's not just a numbers and dollars deal. It's something that we're trying to do because we want to keep doing what we're doing and have something for the next generation.
The drive takes us through a mix of private and public land. It's gorgeous, unspoiled country. Amazing to be here in the middle of it.
Oh, and then some. I just can't imagine ever being able to describe the vastness of this country. And it's untouched.
I say this is the best part.
Beginning riders are just as welcome here as experts, and with 150 horses and no more than 10 guests at a time, the ranch has a well-trained horse that'll fit any rider.
How are you doing?
Good.
Keith Lyson and his wife Linda own their own horses back home in Washington State, where they do a lot of trail riding. But being horseback at Dryhead is way different.
But just the whole thing is just totally different from what we're used to. Well, it's just using different skills, and it's also fun to ride different horses, you know.
Recommend it?
Absolutely.
So is that one you're training?
Yeah.
Working cowboys on a drive like this will use the opportunity to train young horses. And it's always interesting to watch these pros at work.
This is a new experience.
How's he doing?
Not too bad. Can't complain, I guess. He hasn't bucked me off yet.
Cold it was. Every day we'd drive the cows 10 or 15 miles to a designated pasture where we'd leave them for the night, and then ride back to a corral where we'd leave the horses. While much of the week was wet and cold, no one complained. But it sure was nice to see Jen waiting for us at Trail's End with some nice hot chicken soup,
The best.
which we enjoyed inside a horse trailer to get out of the rain.
Nice service at the end of the day.
That's perfect.
A long day in the saddle makes for an early bedtime, and a nice warm bed in a cozy cabin sure felt good. And late in the week, we woke up to a very nice treat. Sunshine.
It's the last day of the cattle drive. We can finally tie our slickers onto the saddle instead of wearing them. It's a gorgeous day. No rain. Nice to get a little break in the weather, huh?
Yeah, you're not kidding.
It's gonna be a day God gave us, you know?
Chris's two young sons joined us for part of the drive. Always fun to hang out with ranch kids. Growing up horseback with a rope in their hand, pushing cows with Dad.
I came out as a guest in
And Terry Conley is proof you don't have to be born into the ranch life to be a cowboy. The retired Ohio firefighter first came to Dryhead as a guest back in 1992. Today, he works for the outfit.
I retired from working 24 on and 48 off. Now I just work 7 days a week.
Terry was on the drive a few years earlier when Jake's daughter Cassidy rode with us at the age of 3. A fearless cowgirl in her spurs, Jake had to tell her to slow down a time or two. It was great fun to have her along. This year she had to go to school, but she was there to greet Dad when he got home.
My favorite part is my kids get to be with me at all times, all the time. I mean, unless moms teach them school.
Someday Cassidy will be riding her with her kids. At least that's the hope.
We hope. We hope.
We love this country and we love this lifestyle.
And the guests who sign up to experience this authentic slice of the American West
How's your day?
20 out of 10. Most beautiful day. It's fantastic.
are critical to keeping the dream alive at Dryhead.
I think it's an amazing experience for anyone, and it's a huge piece of heritage and an honor to be here.
Coming up, the life and work of the legendary cowboy artist. But first, Boot Hill Cemetery in Billings, Montana. The modern world rushes by this seemingly forgotten historic hilltop, the last resting place of the pioneers who lived and died in the Wild West town of Colson, Montana. Founded in 1877, the Yellowstone River town lasted just 8 years before it was abandoned and replaced in 1885 by the nearby railroad town of Billings. Most buried here died with their boots on, like H.M. Taylor. The deputy was gunned down when he tried to save a woman from being killed by her drunken husband. Taylor, nicknamed Muggins after his favorite card game, was a cavalry scout who gained fame as the first to bring news of the Custer Massacre to the town of Bozeman. His story is one of the few still remembered from a Wild West town largely forgotten, the only evidence of which lies here, in the graves of those who died with their boots on, buried here on Boot Hill. A poker game fueled by whiskey explodes in gunfire outside a frontier saloon. A wounded cowboy falls from his horse, his foot hung up in a stirrup, while his two buddies open fire on the gambler who shot him. Panicked horses scream and rear at the shooting, desperate to get away. It's all captured in oil on canvas in smoke of a .45, another action-packed painting of the Old West from the brush of the legendary cowboy artist, Charlie Russell. And today, you can stand exactly where that painting was created, in Russell's restored historic log cabin studio in Great Falls, Montana.
If you've ever seen a picture of Charlie's studio, maybe with Charlie standing in his studio, when you walk into the studio now, you'll feel like you're walking into one of those photographs.
Many consider Charles M. Russell the greatest Western artist of all time. His paintings and other works capture every aspect of the Old West, Native Americans, cowboys, and Western wildlife, much of which he saw firsthand.
Russell wanted to experience that West, the real West, before it was gone. And he did that. And he painted what he saw, what he felt, what he experienced.
Obsessed with the Wild West, Russell's parents let 16-year-old Charlie leave his affluent St. Louis home for Montana in 1880, where he found work wrangling horses for the big cattle outfits on the open range. Russell would cowboy for more than 10 years, experiencing firsthand a life that would soon vanish forever. And all the while, the self-taught artist was sketching, drawing, and molding clay like he'd always done, both remembering and imagining the dramatic Western scenes he would later recreate in oil, watercolor, and bronze.
Russell really created the scenes that we remember today as a culture as the American West. The West that we think about when we think about the West is the West that Charlie Russell painted.
The artist also spent significant time with Indians, with whom he had always sympathized and painted more than any other subject.
His Native American portraits are thought to be quite authentic, and so he has a strong following among Native American communities who see him as an artist who portrayed their culture more realistically than other artists did, especially with the Blackfeet, because he knew them well, spent time living with them, understood their culture. He understood sign language, a great painting fireboat, for example. One of the warriors in that scene is making the sign for fireboat, which is steamboat, coming up the Missouri River. So there's a whole level of communication in the paintings that, unless you read sign language, you miss it altogether.
And most of that treasured work was created in the log cabin studio he built in 1903, just steps from the home he shared with his wife, Nancy. When we first visited the C.M. Russell Museum, you could only see Charlie's studio from a relatively small viewing area through a wall of plexiglass, an arrangement that had been in place for decades. Still, patrons at the time certainly enjoyed their visit.
Like I said, I can envision somebody like Russell with one of his friends like Johnny Matheson, who was one of his old compatriots. Matheson was so used to being outside that he never got used to the idea of going to an indoor bathroom. Going into the house, and Matheson wants to go to the bathroom, and Charlie says, well, I'll take you upstairs, and he said, I'll take you to the bathroom, and Matheson says, I took a bath 2 months ago. He says, I need to go now. He says, where's the barn? So eventually he had to take him outside somewhere. Unfortunately, Nancy wasn't here at the time, or so the story goes. So.
Totally changed from what someone may have experienced if they visited the museum previously.
But now the museum has completed a $1 million renovation and reinterpretation of both the studio and the Russell home.
If Charlie was just sitting here painting, that's what that photograph showed. And so,
instead of looking through glass, you can step into the actual studio and into the world where Charlie lived and worked a century ago.
That's one of the fun things about this studio. You can look at these old historic photographs and then look at the wall and say, oh yeah, I see it now. I can see the birch backrest, and it's over in that corner.
The cabin was filled with mementos and artifacts from the world he'd lived in, as both a friend of the Indian and a working cowboy. Beaded gloves, Indian leggings, and a war shirt are among the items hanging from the cabin walls. And there's a red sash like the one Charlie usually wore around his waist. An easel displays an unfinished painting with tubes of paint and a brush on a nearby pallet.
We don't want people touching things, but we also want people to be able to walk over and look at this desk and say, oh look, this is a letter Charlie was writing to Joe DeYoung. I wonder what he had to say. He's talking about how to draw a horse. I wonder if there's maybe a model of a horse. Oh yeah, I bet Charlie made that model up there, and maybe he was looking at that model when he was writing this letter. That's what we want people to be able to do.
It all looks as if Charlie has just stepped out for a moment, except that everything you now see is a historic recreation.
You know, people are sad that it's no longer Charlie's real artifacts, but it wasn't sustainable. Those artifacts, when we moved them, some of them were so fragile, they broke when we moved them.
Charlie's real memorabilia was on display in the studio when visitors stood behind the glass wall, but it wasn't an ideal situation.
It just wasn't a very interactive or immersive experience.
Yet while the items might not be Charlie's originals, the studio certainly feels authentic as you explore the big room where the master created his art and took time out to visit with his old cowboy buddies, known as the Bunch. Russell often included his friends in his paintings, many came to know during his years horseback in the 1880s.
And anyone who'd been to Montana and seen the regions where he was painting would quickly realize that there was something to this, that it had a real feel to it, a feel of authenticity that other artists couldn't capture.
But we'd probably never know of Charlie if not for Nancy.
Very true.
Before she came along, the talented artist often gave his work away or traded it for drinks. But everything changed when he met Nancy Cooper in 1895. Married the following year, the 18-year-old Mrs. Russell became Charlie's business manager, negotiating the exhibits, commissions, and sales of his work that brought Charlie fame and an income worthy of his talent.
She was the one who negotiated all the calendar deals and things like that. So when you go in the home, you'll really get a sense of what Charlie and Nancy's home life might have looked like and what Nancy's role was.
Today, when you step inside the home the couple built in 1900, a recreation of Nancy's desk is the first thing you see. And you can read the actual letters she typed and sent to prospective buyers and exhibitors.
So this is July 8th, 1919, and she's talking about her visit to Calgary.
While the studio was clearly Charlie's man cave, Nancy was in charge of the house. Newly refurbished and reimagined by the museum, the house is furnished and decorated to look as it would have in the early 1900s.
We took it back to as close as we could get it to when Charlie and Nancy lived there.
Meticulous researchers tracked down and recreated the home's original red-flowered wallpaper.
So this display is fun. It shows the restoration of the house. And so when we were peeling back the wallpaper, we had to go through all of these layers. And so we have pictures of what all the layers looked like until we got back to the original. So you can still see the holes. And
Christina points out the marks where curtains hung to block off a downstairs living room, a corner of which served as Charlie's studio from 1900 until the cabin studio was built in 1903.
That's where he painted. And he would set up these little dioramas of a teepee or one of his little sculptures of a horse. He would work on it there. And so we recreated those scenes.
The room also featured an outside door of its own where the bunch could slip in for a visit without disturbing Nancy.
The main entrance.
History tells us some of those guys clearly preferred their old cowboy buddy to the domesticated version of Charlie, but the artist was a happily married man. His talent focused, managed, and likely inspired by his true love, Russell was incredibly prolific. He created more than 4,000 works of art, recreating the unspoiled West of cowboys, Indians, and wildlife that he had known firsthand and missed like a long-lost love.
Russell wanted to experience the real West before it was gone, and he did that. And so, working as an artist, he really concentrated on painting what he called the West that has passed.
But thanks to Charlie and the guiding love of Nancy, we can still visit that world of buffalo hunts, wagon trains, and the smoke of a .45, and the home and studio where the paintbrush of the cowboy artist brought it all back to life. Up next, the Galloping Goose and other treasures of the Colorado Railroad Museum. The Galloping Goose rolls again in Golden, Colorado. Built from the body of a 1926 Pierce Arrow automobile and powered by a Ford V8 engine, the Goose is one of the more unusual trains you can discover and even ride at the Colorado Railroad Museum.
My job today is to tell you the story about the Galloping Goose.
This is our turntable.
You'll find lots of stories here in the more than 100 historic train cars and engines on display, and they all have one thing in common.
Anything that we have on the property either ran through Colorado or within Colorado. This is the oldest operating steam locomotive in Colorado.
Built in 1881, it's in the roundhouse for maintenance. Outside, the museum's biggest locomotive, a 1944 steam engine that could do 100 miles an hour. And there are miniature trains that run all day, a fabulous model train exhibit courtesy of the Denver Garden Railway Society. Many of the real trains displayed here are narrow gauge, engines and cars that ran on track just 3 feet wide.
The narrow gauge is the inside rails,
compared to the standard track width of nearly 5 feet across.
They used narrow gauge track and equipment because it was easier to get up the steep grades through the mountains.
This museum has one of the country's biggest collections of narrow gauge equipment.
This dates back to the 1920s.
And a team of experts that maintain what works and restore what doesn't.
Everything from the body down was missing.
And bringing 100-year-old railroad equipment back to life is a challenging task.
It's a big challenge because you can't just buy parts off the shelf anymore. You got to pretty much make everything from scratch. We had one original was left, and these are original 1880s, wooden mahogany passenger seat sides.
Taylor's job is a bit like detective work or an archaeological dig. To rebuild antique rolling stock, he and his team spent hours studying old photographs.
Staring at photographs, trying to figure out how they built something, and one of the key things we did was part of the bolster. We found out the railroad used rail turned upside down and bent into this very unique shape to make the bolsters, which then have these rollers that ride on the outside of the car and helps keep the car from tipping over. Extra protection. That's part of the research stuff that I love doing.
Ran from Chicago through Denver and all the way to California.
There are pristine examples of the glory days of railroading, like an executive's private car, which was the private jet of its day. And you can sit where everyday passengers rode back in the 1950s.
And as you can see, it was a nice way to travel.
Or the 1880s.
It was beautiful, but it was functional at the same time.
Outside, it's easy to get a sense of the romance of the rails. This sleek California Zephyr had a second life as the ski train from Denver to Winter Park. There's a steam-powered snowplow that kept the tracks clear up until 1965. And Locomotive 318 was state-of-the-art technology in 1880. This is how Americans traveled back in the day and back in the Old West. And if you want to travel back to that day, you can, when you step on board the Galloping Goose and the other splendid pieces of living history at the Colorado Railroad Museum. That's it for now. We're back next time with more cool stuff from today's Wild West. I'm Mark Bedore. We'll see you down the trail. For more information on the people and places featured in today's Wild West, or to order show DVDs and books, visit todayswildwest.com. Funding for Today's Wild West provided by the Leggett Foundation and the Chuck Wagon Trail Riders Foundation.